Welcome to the program. Tonight I'm joined by Lillian McDermott to talk about building responsibility and careers. Here's what she had to say.
When you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. So in whatever situation that you find yourself in, whether you're the boss or an employee that feels devalued, find the beauty in everything. I'm talking about being proactive, being helpful, going around and say, how can I support you? And you're doing all of this, but still things aren't working out. Maybe that's not the job for you.
Right.
So it's time to start in your evenings, before you go to bed, start searching the blogs for a job. And look at your list of all the values that you want in your next job and start dreaming about it, start being grateful about your next position. And you know what? When the time is right, that intuition will kick in and say, you know, this is where I need to be. I know it, I know it, I know it.
Building Responsibility and Lillian McDermott when we return.
Funding for your career is provided by
Miller Media Group. Education for life.
From Florida's Space Coast, this is your career.
Welcome to Your Career. I'm Debbie Featherston, your host, and with me today is Lillian McDermott. And Lillian is a marketing specialist, as well as she has a talk show, a radio talk show here on the Space Coast. And Lillian, we're here to talk about building responsibility.
Yes, we are.
This is, I think, a conversation we both have been dying to have because we're both passionate about building personal responsibility. Tell me, how did this topic rise to a level of importance for you?
I've always been responsible. But responsibility that I used to look at mostly is, how are you responsible? How is that person responsible? How's that person responsible? Because I'm going to be responsible. But then I would compare and contrast. But that puts us in a victim mentality. So once I started taking responsibility for my own life, it didn't matter what you did.
Right, right.
And so once I realized that, my entire life changed. And it went through the process of becoming a life coach. I went back to kind of work on myself, because with the radio show, I work on being a friend and giving friendly advice and having people, experts on the show. But then I thought, if I'm asking my audience, my listening friends to grow, I need to do the same. And what I discovered was a world of responsibility that I had never tapped into. And it was about my responsibility, what I can do for me, regardless of what you do.
Right.
I can still be responsible.
Right. You know, that reminds me, when I was a young kid, my dad used to say, Deb, if you change yourself, the world around you will change.
Perfect. That is
perfect. I think that has really influenced the way that I think about personal responsibility. You know, I've always held myself to a very high standard for that. So that's why when I met you, and you were so passionate about this topic, that I went, this resonates.
Right?
This resonates.
Yeah.
Let's have a conversation.
Yeah.
So when you think about responsibility in the workplace, what role do you see personal responsibility having in the workplace, Lillian?
So it doesn't matter where you're at. Responsibility is transferable. So I'll give you an example. Maybe I can answer you in a way. I just recently attended an event that the person wanted to change the world. But that person showed up an hour late, an hour and a half late to the meeting every single time. So there was no, I'm so sorry I'm late. It was like she had her own time. So I'm thinking, how are you going to change the world if you can't even show up on time? How you work, how you are within you is how you are outside. So if I take personal responsibility for my life, it's going to change everything around me. It's going to change my personal relationships, so my children, my spouse, my friends. It's going to change my career, because now I'm picking what I want, not the job that I just float into.
Right.
It's going to change my how I present myself in the world. It's going to change it's going to change my health, because now I'm going to eat well. You know, there's so many different aspects. So responsibility is a key part in the business world, because I can blame you for not being promoted,
Right.
But the reality is, if I really look at myself and say, okay, how did I create this lack of promotion? Not for blame or shame. Again, the word responsibility that I'm talking about is not about blame, shame, duty, or fault. It's about personal. I'm going to look at myself no different than I look at 2 + 2 = 4. I would look at my life and say, okay, what am I doing here? And if you go to my website at whenyounneedafriend.com, you look at my 4 responsibility questions, which is, how did I create it? What are the gifts and lessons? What's going to be different? And how am I going to use this to help others? Those are 4 questions. Now, I know how people think, and they go, I'm not going to say how I created it. It's not my fault. Again, we're not talking fault. What I'm talking about is, it could be that I was hired into the company. So how did I create it? Maybe I didn't respond at the same time. But it's not to find fault. It's just to sit with and look at the equation. I would not get angry if 2 + 2 = 4. Nor will I get angry if I need to maybe step up my game, or I need to educate myself a little bit more. So to answer your question, that's the kind of responsibility that's now going to say, well, it's not your fault that I didn't get the promotion. Let me look. Do I need to educate myself better? Get feedback. What kept me from that? And so instead of blame others, being victim,
Right.
you know, we can take that attitude with our health as well. You know, I was born this way, or it's my culture, or it's whatever. No, learn what the proper foods that will provide and promote nutrition in your life and your body balance, and eat those foods. So it's responsibility is probably, if you boil down your life and you take one word, that's why I'm so passionate about it, because I'm very simple that way. One word, responsibility, will change your entire life.
Absolutely. And when I'm thinking about the workplace, you know, one of the things that I think about is that it's actually a shared responsibility, that really within an organization, the corporations have a responsibility to provide resources and support. The leaders have, you know, again, a level of responsibility, and the employees have a level of responsibility. So when they're working really in partnership. But I like the fact that you narrow it down and say, you as an individual have more control. Don't give up your power.
Correct.
Empower yourself by looking inward and reflecting on what you could do differently so that you would get that promotion the next time.
When you do your job, and I do my job, if you're responsible and I'm responsible, we create a win-win.
Yeah.
And so the world says that you have to lose in order for me to win. We see it all over. We see it in the Super Bowl. We see it in sports. We see it in, you know, who wins the pageant, the election. There's so many different ways that you have to lose in order for me to win. But if I enter a team with a win-win mentality, I'm going to be responsible, and I'm going to come to you and say, how can I support you? How can I be at my best? What are some of the ways that we can work together? Create that win-win, because if I win, you're going to win, the establishment's going to win. And for those who are thinking right now, wait a minute, in sports somebody loses. Nobody loses in sports, because everybody gets paid, everybody gets a ring, we all get entertained, everybody gets a piece of whatever the experience was in sports.
Yeah.
So we all win.
Yeah.
But we battle each other, and the media creates this bloodbath that you have to lose. But if we take that responsibility along with win-win, now we can all carry the load together.
Yeah. So let's take a look at what are some of the behaviors of a responsible person. You know, are there any that come to mind?
Behaviors of a responsible person is being able to take accountability, to sit and be able to look at what is my impact, to really desire positive and negative or neutral feedback, to be able to sit with somebody and say, I want to listen to what you have to say to me. And I'm going to listen to you no different than I'm going to watch a movie. I'm going to eat popcorn. I'm just going to eat popcorn during this time, and I'm just going to let you speak. And I'm going to take what you have to say, I'm going to internalize it, and I'm going to work on that. So that's the ability to listen and to take that not personally. I don't know if you've read the book, The 4 Agreements by Don.
I'm familiar with it. I've not
Okay.
read it in its entirety. No.
Okay, so let your word be impeccable is number 1. So these are not mine.
Yeah.
So let your word be impeccable. So here's the thing that happens with somebody. Yeah, I'm going to do it. I'll do it later. But later never comes.
Yeah.
Oh, I forgot. These are all excuses. So excuses be gone, because that would be the opposite of being responsible, is making up an excuse. Doesn't matter what the excuse is, it's giving up your power and saying, oh, I don't have to do it because. I don't care what the because is. If you're going to be responsible, let your word be impeccable. So if you're not going to do it, say, yeah, I have no intention in doing that. I'm just saying I'm going to do it later because I want to look good for you and I want to tell you what you want to hear. Can you imagine a world where people say, no, I can't do this right now, but I can do it later? So again, let's create a win-win.
Yeah.
It's that underlying current of win-win, as well as listening, let your word be impeccable, so say what you mean and do it. And so the second is don't take anything personal. So there's a lot
Great
of
advice.
business, there's a lot of business dynamics. You know, there's a lot of personality dynamics. And if somebody doesn't like me, I got a call on my show one time. This girl was going to law school, 25 students. But she calls the show because one person didn't like her. But she called the show for that one person. So as she was talking and elaborating on this one person, I asked her, well, are there only 2 people in your class? And she goes, oh no, there's like 25, 27 people. And you called me for that one person. So let's focus on what you want. Let's focus on what you want to desire. You have other people that are supporting your belief and that are supporting you and showing you that you're doing a good job. Can you try to react with that person or interact with that person without listening beyond personal? So if she says something to you, just see this is more about her than about you. Transfer that instead of worrying and making yourself miserable, that law school isn't what you want it to be. Focus it, it's one person,
Right.
and this person might have some issues. And love that person wherever they're at, and be there for that person and support that
Yeah.
person.
It's almost like, not allowing someone else to define you.
Correct.
And in this particular case, apparently she'd given up her power, and this person was really
One person. And so that was making her miserable to the point where she was thinking of dropping out of law school.
oh, it's sad.
And I said, this has nothing to do with that one person. It has everything to do with you, because you're unwilling to accept that we're all, whatever she's dealing with is her issue.
Right.
Not everybody has to like you,
Yeah.
but you have to be likable. That doesn't give you an excuse to be mean-spirited to her.
Right.
Maybe she's mean-spirited to you, but it doesn't give you an excuse to the other way. So
Right.
just love them where you're at. Can you imagine a world that even you love your enemies? Isn't that what we're all called to do? So that's another one. So a positive attitude. A positive attitude, an I can do it attitude. Just this weekend, I was in California, and we were going through some different, assignment of having to draw deep anger, deep disdain for people, and like drag something from your past that made you. And I'm like, I'm not there anymore. I can't even muster it. It was like really shallow stuff, and I was like writing it down. I'm like, God, I'm not feeling it anymore.
Yeah.
Because
That's
if you think that everything happens for a purpose, then you start shifting your thought, and you start thinking, okay, how can I be of service here instead of being served? So you can start thinking about, how can I be of service? How can I see this person, instead of getting annoyed that you're the weakest link?
Yeah.
How can I support you? And instead of coming from a place of superiority, you come from a place of compassion.
Yeah.
So it's just a little slight shift can make a big difference. So I think the third agreement is don't assume. Isn't that a great one?
That is, I love it.
Don't assume anything. So ask a lot of questions. I ask a lot of questions. And maybe I'm annoying, but that has more to do with the other person. So basically, if I ask a lot of questions, I say, if it's, I don't want to take anybody else's time. Can I meet with you privately? Let me understand. So don't assume anything. And then the fourth agreement is always do your best.
Mm-hmm.
So I may not be good at something right now, but I am at 100% of what I know, right?
Right.
And then tomorrow, because I learned a little bit more today, my best will look different.
Mm-hmm.
So doing your best every day looks differently.
That's great. How would you describe an environment where there's high responsibility, high personal responsibility? What might that look like, particularly in contrast to a low personal responsibility environment? Or let's put it this way, when I look at personal responsibility, I see that as the foundation for trust.
Oh, without a doubt, that's one of the ways that you can build as a responsible person and start building that kind of responsibility, is building that trust. When you're talking about high responsibility versus low responsibility, and we're talking about the same group, what comes to mind is more of a leadership, where the leader feels that they're more responsible than the people. But I think that if everybody, if you can create an environment where everybody feels invested, everybody feels responsible, everybody feels that they matter, then I think that dynamic would change.
Yeah.
When high responsibility, low responsibility, it doesn't matter, it's all responsibility.
Yeah.
And if we tackle what our duties are within that assignment of whatever tasks that are divided, if we all take 100% personal responsibility for whatever that is, it doesn't matter if it's low or high.
Yeah.
It's perfect. It's perfect for that person. It's when we start comparing the high and the low and analyzing, well, this person has more, this person has less, then perhaps maybe attitudes and judgments, and why don't I have more and why do I have less? But I think that everybody, wherever they're at, that's where they need to be.
At that moment.
At that moment. And that's where that 100% responsibility, whether it's a high, whether you can lose your job if something happens, or whether it doesn't matter if you don't do the task. I don't know if that's what you're, am I understanding that correctly?
I think so, because what I'm really looking for is, or what I'm curious about from your perspective, I have my own attitudes, as you can tell, but what, yeah, there you go. So what I'm curious about is your perspective, Lily, around, if I were an employee, let's just take this scenario. If I am an individual who's looking for a job, right, and I'm trying, or maybe I'm internal to an organization, and I'm trying to determine, do I want to work with this team or that team, right? How do I go about assessing the teams and to be confident that I'm selecting a team where there's high trust, high personal responsibility, because I see those just so hand in hand.
I think that whether you select a team that has that value or not, as long as you have the value, it really doesn't matter. I know that frustration could set in if you are like, this is my high value.
Yeah.
But I think that one of the things that I talk about a lot on my show is intuition. We ignore our intuition. I think people, when they walk into a job, they know.
Yeah.
They just know which team is going to suit them. It's only when we take things personal, it's only when we start putting judgment on things, that's when we kind of muck it up. A bit. And so if we were to just go in there and just be what we've been asked to do, and maybe, I know that there are particular bosses that are little micromanagers, or they're a little bit, or some of them that are less. So I think that would be something that you might want to look at within your personality, and just be grateful that you have a job. Just be grateful that you're able to be impactful. And if you're not impactful, and if you're not happy, because you can always choose out.
Yeah.
You can choose in and you can choose out. And if you choose out, then write down all the values, all the criteria that you want in a job, and then go to something as opposed to leave something. Like some people leave a job.
It's a great point for people to remember.
Yeah, sometimes people leave a job because they hate their boss, or they're not valued.
Yeah.
And they get tired and they start developing an attitude, and all of a sudden they hate their job, they don't want to be there anymore. But then they go to the next job that is exactly the same as the job they just left. They just changed titles, they just changed names, the players have changed, the team has changed. But they're bringing themselves to every team that they go to every group, to every job. I'm bringing me to all of that. So I really need to take a good look of what my wants are, not what I don't want.
Right.
So I would advise someone to sit down, and you can do this with career, you can do this with relationships, you can do this with health, you can do this with giving back to society. Sit down and write down 25 things you want the most from this next job or this next girlfriend or guy friend or whatever. And that list can change as you progress, and you say, oh, well, that didn't work. You check that off. Let me add something else. But work on what you want.
Right.
Because many times we dwell on what we don't want, and we get more of what we don't want. So if we find ourselves in a situation where we don't like where we're at, change it.
Right.
Or change your perception.
Well, it ties right back to mindset, positive attitude.
Yeah.
You know, and that's all part of being responsible. If you're looking at a situation, or you find yourself in a situation where it's not quite the environment that you want, maybe what we should be inviting people to do is to really look inward and say, is there anything within my control that I can change that may help to change the environment around me?
Absolutely. But again, that high responsibility, low responsibility, sometimes you find yourself in a situation where somebody overrules what you want to bring in, and that's when, you know, people get suppressed. So you're absolutely right in saying, how can I go in? How can I be of support? How can I be of service? I own a marketing company, and I deal with lots of clients. I've dealt with customer service. I love dealing with customer service, training, and all of that. When you go into an environment with different personalities, we need to learn to adjust.
Right.
We need to learn to adapt, because if not, then we're going to be miserable. So when Wayne Dyer said this, but he was not the original person. I believe it was Planck that said it.
Okay.
It's when you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. So in whatever situation that you find yourself in, whether you're the boss or an employee that feels devalued, find the beauty in everything and see where you can make a difference. If you cannot make a difference and you've tried every avenue to make a difference and you still don't feel that you're being allowed, instead of being the victim, well, it's his fault and now I'm going to be a victim and I'm going to pout in the corner. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about being proactive, being helpful, going around and say, how can I support you? And you're doing all of this, but still things aren't working out. Maybe that's not the job for you.
Right.
So it's time to start in your evenings, before you go to bed, start searching the blogs for a job. And look at your list of all the values that you want in your next job and start dreaming about it, start being grateful about your next position. And you know what? When the time is right, that intuition will kick in and say, you know, this is where I need to be. I know it, I know it, I know it.
Yeah, it's really good because you're helping people to really think more strategically and big picture, if you will.
Absolutely.
Right. So instead of, as you have said earlier, instead of being a victim and not feeling they have any control, you know, be empowered. Think about your mindset. Think about the way you're looking at it. Think about the messaging that you're sending yourself, and reframe that. Right.
Reframing is key. You know, to listen, become aware, is to listen, to ask, you know, because you also need feedback, because there's a lot of people in the world that feel that everything they do is perfect. That might not be a good perception of their reality. It might be their perception, it may not be reality. So it's very important that if I think I'm doing a 100% great job and I keep getting passed for the promotion or I'm not getting what I want, I would have an honest, don't take it personal, you asked, to say, what can I do to get that next promotion? Why not ask? A lot of people are afraid. A lot of people are afraid to ask that question for their boss, from their peers, from themselves.
Right.
Journal, write about it. What could I do? What could I have done in that situation that I could have been helpful instead of adversary?
Yeah, yeah. I know when, stepping back just a little bit, when a person is in that position where they're looking for a new opportunity, right? Whether it's internal and they're wanting to move, or they're wanting, it's, they're external and they're wanting to, land.
Yeah.
That one of the things I think is vital is that they really look at the culture of the organization. They look at the values
Absolutely.
and the mission of the organization. That's going to tell them a lot in terms of how well that aligns with their belief around personal responsibility, right? Is this really going to be a culture that breeds and fosters that accountability?
Great point.
Yeah,
and it's always good. But even in the cultures, let's say I love the idea of this particular company, and I am in line with that particular company. You still have to deal with the personalities, the egos, the having to play the
Certainly.
game. And so if you look at it as a game, someone might get hurt. But if you think of it as, I am invested in this, but it's not my entire life.
Right.
I still have wife and kids or relationships I want to have. I still want to have fun. I still
Right.
want to go on the trail. I still want to do other things. But if we focus at this is who I am, and if I identify too much with this is who I am that job,
Yeah.
that's not true.
Yeah.
It's all in your head. It's all in your head. So that's when we really take back and start looking at life as, let's create some balance here. How can I create some balance? Because regardless of the company being an absolutely perfect, totally in line with my vision, the personalities in the company may not be.
Yeah.
It's funny, and we were talking earlier before the show that I just went on a trail. I went backpacking, and it was so true that as I was on this trail, until I got to my goal, I could not quit. I didn't have a car to go to. I didn't have anything to go through. I went through that whole entire 5 miles uphill with 30 pounds on my back, and I had to finish it. Now, today, I was at the gym on the treadmill, and I thought, at any time, I can get off of this. And so many times, we live with that, I can get off of this too quickly mentality. Sometimes we see the task, we see the goal, we work together as a team, and when we got up there at that place where we were going to, we celebrated together.
Yeah.
But when I got off the treadmill today, there was no high fives. I was by myself. I didn't meet my goal, that type of thing.
Right,
But I was
right.
able to walk off and do whatever it was that I wanted to do.
Well, that's awesome. And Lily, that's going to have to be the last word. Thank you so much for being my guest.
Oh, it's a
And
pleasure.
on behalf of my guest and everyone here on the set of Your Career, thank you for watching, and remember, be career happy.
More information about this program is available online at millermediagroup.org. Funding for Your Career is provided by
Miller Media Group. Education for life.